Hey, what's up, you guys? Time for the movie retrospective. Doing some British horror today.
Yeah.
And some folk horror. Kind of a lesser-known folk horror movie, I feel like.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so this came out, what?
Oh, so it's just a 70s British flick. Kind of like a damn, I don't know, like a witchcraft movie. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And this is kind of like, this was actually, because, you know, if you know anything about British horror, you know, your big behemoths of like the 60s and 70s was Hammer Studios, who kind of did sort of Victorian era stuff, more classical Gothic stuff. And then you had Amicus that usually did anthology movies or portmanteau movies in the British parlance.
Yeah.
But there was also a much smaller, kind of scrappy sort of production company called Tygon.
Yeah, this is the first time I didn't even know that Tygon existed.
Yeah,
I was watching this, and I thought, yeah, I'm a big fan of Hammer because Hammer's boobalicious. Okay?
Yeah,
Now, it is. They're definitely selling sex on that one, but in a good way. And then Amicus is a little drier. I always thought it was kind of dry. This movie's trying to give you like the best of both worlds, if you ask me. They're trying to give you kind of the realism, and they're also trying to throw some boobs in there.
Yeah, there's boobs in here, and yeah,
there's a bunch of sex and stuff. But it's mostly innuendo. You do see some nudity. It's not as gratuitous, not as sexy and high end as Hammer. Hammer's had a lot of style to it too. You know, real good looking European actresses and cool, cool actors and shit, and really good sets. And this is more about realism, less style, more realism. And I guess you could say it in a way. And it's a monster movie, witches and shit.
It's like a witchcraft movie. Like I said, it's folk horror. Usually when you talk about British folk horror specifically, most people talk about Witchfinder General, which came out in 1968 with Vincent Price, which was also done by Tygon.
Good
by
one.
the way.
Yeah, this one felt a lot like that movie.
And then, it was the same production company. Yeah. And also, obviously, The Wicker Man, which actually came out a couple years after this.
Okay, now you see it now. I didn't know that was the same company that did Wicker Man. Yep.
Well, no, it's not the same company that did Wicker Man. It's the same company that did Witchfinder General.
Okay.
Did this movie.
I thought you said it was...
No, I just said The Wicker Man came out a couple years after this as another one that's like a British horror, like folk horror.
Yeah, it has that folk horror angle. You'll see it. This one would go right along in with some of the more recent folk horror movies, you know. Midsommar and stuff. It's like that. Yeah,
there's been kind of a folk horror revival lately. And honestly, if you have Shudder, they just added a whole bunch of folk horror movies, including this one. Which I think they had this one before, but they added a whole bunch of other ones. I think this is also on Tubi, actually. But there's this really awesome documentary that Shudder just added, and it's called, what's it called? Darklands, what shit? No, it's called, I have it written down somewhere. Where the hell is it? It's called Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched. And it's a history of folk horror, and it's over 3 hours long, and it is fascinating. It's not just British folk horror, it's folk horror everywhere. It's American folk horror, which included kind of like old zombie, Haitian voodoo type films. And it's like folk horror from around the world, and, the recent folk horror revival was stuff like, The Witch and Hagazusa and stuff like that. And it's really, really interesting. And there was like a whole fuck ton of movies in there that I had actually never heard of. So, it's really expanded my movie list. But yeah, so in case we didn't mention it, this is called The Blood on Satan's Claw. That's actually what it was released as in the U.S. I think it's generally regarded by that name now, but I think when it originally came out in the U.K., I think it was called Satan's Skin. I've also seen it under the title The Devil's Touch.
Well, those actually are better, I think.
They do make more sense, because honestly, now Satan's Skin is closer to what actually happens in the movie. Yeah. Although I will note that the thing that happens, I guess it's like a demon that gets brought up it's not technically Satan.
No, it's like a demon.
It's Behemoth.
Yeah.
They actually say who it is.
They eventually show it. It does look kind of corny, but it's an old movie, okay?
And the budget on this was very low. I think £82,000.
Yeah,
was how much this cost.
If you grew up on old Tom Baker Doctor Who, you'll recognize it. It's that level of costume work, but it's good though. I like it. I grew up watching that kind of shit, But you see the thing, you're like, oh, okay. So that's the demon. It took me a while to understand exactly what was going on. Jenny kind of has the advantage over me because she knows a lot about witchcraft and witchcraft books and witchcraft stories and all the tropes. So, and she had seen the movie before, so she knew what was coming. I was kind of not really understanding what was happening in the movie for a bit. But then once I realized what it was, they were trying to reassemble this demon. It made a lot more sense. It's weird, you know. They do witchcraft stories, do weird shit. Each follower's growing a part of the damn demon, and they're gonna cut that off and assemble the demon that way. That's wild, man. That's a wild idea. I wish they'd had more money to show that in a better way. It gross you out, like they would do from like Heredity or something. That idea would have been really good.
I don't think I've ever seen that done in another movie.
No,
I mean, I'm sure there might have been, but that's like a really good idea.
Yeah, they're
like,
sacrificing body parts to assemble this thing, and it's going to be alive, and it's going to fight and shit. And it's all these, and it was weird is that Satanism, there's like an outbreak of Satan worshippers in the way that it's kind of like vampires. They don't really explain how it spreads from one to the other. It's just next thing you know, all these damn teenagers are worshiping Satan back in the 1500s.
It's not. It's the 18. No, it's the 1700s.
1700s. Okay.
I think it's 18th century.
Well, they were
like
wearing
early
kind of those
18th century.
pilgrim-looking outfits. I thought it was 1500s, but it doesn't matter.
It's more recent than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That must have been their religion was making them wear that, because they were priests, a lot of them. Remember the round collars and everything? They had the round white collars.
Well, it was a rural village kind of, you know, in England.
It's good.
Yeah, it's like I said, I kind of feel like it's out of what they call the unholy trinity of British folk horror, which, like I said, Witchfinder General, this movie, Wicker Man. I kind of feel like this is the least remembered or the least seen.
Okay.
Which is kind of a shame because I actually really like this one.
Good movie.
Now, interestingly, it does come across, and I guess I didn't realize this the first time because this is the second or third time that I watched it when we watched it for this review. And I didn't know this going in, but the movie originally, conceptually, started out as, and it's interesting because it's almost kind of like you said, it's halfway between Hammer and Amicus. Yeah. The concept of this movie, it actually started out being an anthology. It was actually going to be 3 sort of interlocking stories, one of which was about a young girl who gets trapped in who gets locked in her attic by her aunt. One of which was about a guy who cuts his own demonically possessed hand off, and one in which a bunch of kids in a village find like a weird corpse, like a weird body. So if you've seen the movie, you know that all of those elements come into play, and when they decided to make this into one narrative, actually I think originally the idea was it was going to be set in the Victorian era. But when they were talking about, they're like, well, there's been so many horror movies set in the Victorian era, and maybe everybody's kind of sick of it. So they decided to move it to like 18th century rural England. And, we're going to have it in this kind of backwoods farming community. And we're going to put all of the stories together into one narrative. And to a large extent, it works. But knowing that it started out as an anthology, I think that will become a lot clearer because the pace of the movie is a little bit episodic, I will say that. So if you're not really like following along with what's going on, you're like, wait, who are these people now, or what happened with that guy, or whatever. So I think they did a good job like integrating all the stories into one thing, but there are parts that, because like, for example, like at the very beginning of the movie, the first thing that happens is there's this farmer that lives in this village, and his name's Ralph Gower, and he's tilling the field, and he finds this weird ass looking skeleton, essentially, except it still has like an eyeball, and it has like, looks like it has weird fur on. It's all like fucked up looking. And he's like flipping out, so he goes and tells the judge, who's played by Patrick Wymark. This was his last movie, by the way. He actually died before it came out. He died quite young. He was only 50. And so he goes and tells the judge. The judge, even though he's kind of like, I guess he's more of like a city guy, so he's just kind of like, oh, you backwards country people and your silly superstitions. This is a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, he's like, witches, that's not a thing anymore. What the fuck? And then when he goes back, and the guy's like, no, for sure, for real, like, come and see this weird body. And so he goes, and of course it's gone then. Now, after that, though, there goes into this little thing where there's another dude in the village, this really, really tall, skinny dude with like really long hair, and he brings home his betrothed, whose name is Rosalind, and he's like staying with his aunt, who's a stone cold bitch, by the way. This like old battle axe.
Yeah, she thinks she's pregnant and everything.
Well, yeah, the old lady doesn't think she's pregnant. She thinks the other girl is pregnant.
You brought her here because you knocked her up.
And now you have to marry her.
That hoe's got to be up in the damn attic.
Yeah, so it's obviously there's like, well, she's not even supposed to be staying in the house because that's so improper. But it's like, we'll make her stay up in like the stinky attic where nobody lives. Yeah. Nobody's been up there for like a really long time.
Meet you up there.
Yeah, he's like, after everybody goes to sleep, we're just okay, we'll get on this. Yeah. And so then like, but she's up there, and then like some creepy shit happens. Like the floor starts creaking, and then she starts screaming her head off, and instead of, everybody else in the house being like, oh my gosh, I wonder what's the matter with her, the aunt and the judge, who's also kind of staying there, they're just like, yeah, let's just lock her in there, and then we'll call the people from the mental asylum and come take her away, because clearly she's got some problems. So that happens, and then so the next morning they come and take her away, like to the asylum, and she's just kind of like coming out of there like, that's right, motherfucker. And then like she has a hand like that, and she has claws. Yeah. Now you don't see that woman again, and that woman is not like brought up again. So like I said, things like that you can see like where this movie started out as an anthology.
Again, did you?
Yeah, like she presumably goes off to the
to the cult
asylum. Yeah. No, she went to a mental asylum.
But they had the hand though.
Well, no, because I think that the hand was either from her or it was from part of the body that they found.
So she was growing that claw for nothing?
I guess. Or, yeah, maybe they took it from her. But see, that's again another thing. They didn't really make that super clear. Like because it looked like at the beginning of the movie where the farmer like finds the remains of the demon, you're meant to assume, that's going to be resurrected. It almost just looks like a head, but it could be like maybe the claw was in there with it, or maybe so she was growing a claw.
Yeah, the head had eyes in it too.
It had one eye, and then it had like worms and shit coming out of it.
Side. Yeah, it might have been reassembling or something. But it's weird because they start being afflicted by Satanism, and it starts off as a patch of skin. That's why they called it devil's skin or Satan's skin. And it starts growing, and it takes over a whole body part. And then later on in the movie, they're having this big ritual, and they got to chop off that body part, and they're going to assemble this damn demon at this big ritual. They're having orgies and shit. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's just kind of like, and so the guy whose fiance gets taken off to the asylum, you're led to assume that she was, I guess, the first victim of this demon that came out of the earth.
Yeah, somehow that hand showed back up. But.
Right. Like, one thing that's really interesting that that the director, who's Piers Haggard, by the way, in case I didn't... He also did a couple... He did the Quatermass Conclusion. He Fiendish Plotted Dr. Fu Manchu, like a bunch of other ones. Yeah, he did that one.
Yeah.
So... He really wanted, and this is a very folk horror-y type of trope, he's like, a lot of the shots in the movie are low angle. He's like, because I wanted to give the impression that whatever this evil was, it was like seeping out of the ground.
Yeah, it's got good camera work in it.
Yeah, which, like I said, that's kind of like a very folk horror-y, like the horror comes from the land, like a lot of it's rural, particularly British folk horror, not around the world. But yeah, so after that happens, it's just kind of like... the same guy whose fiance was taken off to the asylum, he goes and sleeps up in the attic room later and thinks that he sees presumably the demon, and he tries to cut its hand off, but then he finds out that he has actually cut his own hand off, in his confusion or delusion, whatever, like the demon is showing him.
Yeah, it's using witchcraft on you.
Yeah, it's using witchcraft on you essentially. But the thing about it though is that most of the kids immediately get on board with this Satan worshiping thing.
Yeah, not really explained.
Again, not explained.
It's like an outbreak of vampirism because they lose their identities. They just like Satan, and they're turning on people and committing murders. And
I just like Satan. Yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't really explain how it happens. It's just an outbreak of it, kind of like they've been bitten by something. They get possessed. I guess that'd be a good way to put it. They get possessed.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, and they don't really explain either why Angel Blake, who is kind of like the town hottie, played by Linda Hayden, by the way, who was also in Taste the Blood of Dracula.
A lot of hotties in the movie.
There are.
A lot of hotties in it.
And actually the girl that plays Kathy in this was one of the early companions on Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I think she was on Doctor Who like right around the same time that this movie came out.
Yeah, okay. I didn't recognize her.
Yeah,
I don't know who she played.
Yeah. So,
She probably wasn't playing Sarah, was she? Sarah Jane Smith? I didn't remember.
No, I think she was, I think her name was Zoe. She was Zoe.
Zoe, okay.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar, but I think
so that would have been like early 70s.
Yeah, I don't quite remember that sidekick.
Yeah, but yeah, she was on there, I think around the time that this movie came out.
Yeah, I want to get some of those old Doctor Who's and Tom Baker.
Yeah.
Those were good.
But yeah, so Angel Blake, who, like I said, she's kind of like the town hottie, and she, for whatever reason, after this, other woman, Rosalind, gets taken away, Angel Blake becomes kind of like the focus of the possession. And because she's so popular in the village, you're led to assume she's able to get most of the other kids. And we say kids, but it's mostly like teenagers, to be honest with you.
They're pretending to be teenagers. I think they're a lot older than they're supposed to be.
Well, yeah.
Because there's nude scenes and shit.
Although, I will say that actress, Linda Hayden, who was naked in this, she's 17.
Okay. That was legal, though.
Yeah, I mean,
In some
nowadays kind of questionable. You wouldn't be able to get away with that nowadays, but in 1971, you probably could.
Yeah, you couldn't say anyone.
But so she does get naked in this. But yeah, I think I'm pretty sure she was only 17.
As long as it wasn't considered to be porn, they could.
Yeah, she was just standing there.
Just standing there, right?
I mean, really, she wasn't doing anything that
nothing sexual.
Yeah, I mean, she was being seductive, but she was just standing.
It was simulated.
Right,
it wasn't a real thing.
So it's just kind of like, so she, for whatever reason, becomes sort of like the ringleader, I guess.
Yeah.
And so she gets all of the other kids in the village to go along with it, and they all pretty much, they start going out in the woods and playing and singing and shit like that. And also they start targeting other kids in the village who either it's weird because the two that they target at first, who's Mark and his sister Kathy, they're not so much, it's not so much that they're like, oh, we don't want to do the whole Satan thing, thank you. And they're like, okay, well, we have to kill you now. It's almost just like, well, they didn't get on board quick enough, so they're just going to kill him. But then the thing about it, though, too, is that all of the kids have patches of hair on them. And it's not just kids, because some of the people in the Satan cult are like old people and stuff like that too, because they do show it later on. So it seems like even if you don't accept the whole demonic thing, then the hair is still going to grow on you. And I guess at that point, if you're not willing to go along, they're going to take it by force, I guess, is what they're talking about.
And if you fall into the custody of people who aren't possessed, you'll sit there and straight up tell them that you belong to Satan, and it's like you can't control yourself. And even if they cut that patch of skin off you, it doesn't break this, I guess, spell. You're still a Satanist. It's kind of like, and they kind of act the way a vampire thrall would act.
That's a good way of putting it.
They're like.
Yeah, they get like totally kind of mesmerized, like sucked into this whole cult thing.
Right.
To a point where, we're just gonna kill. Yeah. So it's just kind of like, so they kill Mark. They kind of lure him away and just kill him and like throw him in the woodshed. And then they straight up like go and tell his mom, hey, we just killed your kid. And she's like, what the fuck? And then she goes and finds the body, and obviously she's really upset. Yeah. And then they start targeting the sister, Kathy. And this scene, probably the most infamous in the movie, and it's pretty shocking for 1971. The whole cult of teenagers and a couple of old people, they basically tear her clothes off and like rape her while everybody's watching and making like these really gross like
getting off on
facial expressions, like they're getting off on it.
Yeah, the girls are doing
and it's like they're just like, oh yeah, what is it? Yeah, and it's like, it's really like, the first time I saw this movie, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like for 1971, it's pretty
doesn't really show anything though.
But I mean the implication of it, and honestly the most horrifying thing about it, I thought, was not only that girl's face, like, because she looks like really terrified, as you would be. But then like they show all the other like kids in the village, like these old people, like kind of like smacking their lips at it, like they just think it's the hottest thing ever.
All the young girls are fucking rubbing one out and shit, and fucking getting off on them.
Yeah, it's pretty. Well,
Satan's got them. Satan's got them. See, they're trying to break you out, and it didn't cost anything.
That's true.
It didn't cost anything. It was a free effect. So, they put that in the movie. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, it's like, so I kind of feel like, though, because you could argue, I feel like this isn't quite as, I was going to use the word exploitative, but that's not really, that has a negative connotation, and I don't mean it like that.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, it's just that this does have some kind of shocking, sexual violence and other kind of violence in it as well. But it's not actually played for titillation in the way like a Hammer horror would be.
No, the Hammer would have been real sexy.
Yeah, it would have just been like, hi, I'm a sexy vampire. Look at my boobies. You know what I mean?
Everybody's consensual. Yeah.
Whereas this one is more just kind of like, ew. You know what I mean?
Well, it was a lot like Midsummer. Like the weird shit that was happening. It's which I imagine Midsummer, was modeled after folk horror like this.
Oh yeah.
Where everything's kind of disorienting. You're like, what? And that's the idea.
Yeah, this one did definitely have a very disorienting, kind of like unsettling kind of vibe to it.
The idea. Weird shit.
Yeah, it is really weird. So it's not like, another thing that's interesting about it too is that in a way you kind of have, how like in Witchfinder General, which we reviewed not too long ago, that was based on a real dude, obviously, Matthew Hopkins, who, in the context of the movie, they're making him, he's the villain, right? He's going around killing all these innocent women, like accusing them of witchcraft, and he doesn't give a shit if they're really witches or not. He just wants the money, right? And so he's portrayed as like a villain. Whereas in this movie, I kind of feel like it's more ambiguous, because the character of the judge, which if you're just kind of looking at this movie in sort of like a traditional folk horror kind of way, the character of the judge would be seen as somebody kind of like the Witchfinder General character, played by Vincent Price in that movie, who was a bad guy. But in this one, it almost seems like at the beginning they're kind of setting him up to be the bad guy in the sense that he's like, I don't believe this shit, whatever. And it's just like he comes across as real kind of like dismissive, and he's, thinks the country people are stupid.
Well, he thought the shit was ridiculous.
And all this other kind of stuff. Yeah. But in the end, it almost seems like, and then you have like the Wicker Man, where it almost seemed like, I don't want to say the Wicker Man like made the pagans like the good guys, but it was almost kind of like neither one of them were good guys.
They were both believing in delusions. The Wicker Man, the Wicker people, and the Christians were both deluded.
This one is kind of more like, I don't even know if it would is necessarily saying that like the Christians or whoever, like the persecuting of the pagans were good guys, but it, like I said, it is a lot more ambiguous than some of the other ones were. Like I said,
he just became a believer in the supernatural. He saw it.
Yeah, and he was willing to do, like, he doesn't torture that girl, Margaret, like toward the end. And you do actually feel sympathy for her, even though she is enthralled to Satan and is totally proud of it. Yeah, I'm Satan's kid.
Well, he did the right thing, though. He didn't do anything to her.
Yeah, he didn't really do anything. He did, like, threaten to, but he didn't actually hurt her.
Because at the end, when the whole satanic plot is foiled and the demon is destroyed, it implies that the kids, that the possession ended and they were released from it.
Yeah.
Because they look like they went normal.
Yeah, at least Ralph, who had started to... Now, he didn't really get in on the whole thing, but he got kind of sucked into it later, and then he grows all the Satan fur, like, on his leg, and so he was going to cut off his own leg. That was, like, the last piece of the demon, like, at the final kind of thing.
Yeah. So evidently they weren't really responsible for the crimes that they were committing.
It was the demon taking them over.
Yeah, they're possessed.
So,
They destroyed the demon, and it looked like they were all released.
Although I will say that I believe the original version of the script, they were actually going to have a way more bummer ending, where they basically just like killed everyone in the village, like to wipe out the demonic infestation.
To stop the plague.
To stop it. Yeah, that's what they were going to do. But then they thought...
That'd been good too.
Yeah, that actually would have been a good ending too. But I kind of like that they soften. I don't usually like when they soften endings like that, but I kind of feel like you said, it wasn't really the kid's fault.
No.
It was the demon, and the demon was just, presumably dug up by accident by just somebody that was like plowing the field.
Because Satanism was more like a plague, it came across as kind of like vampirism being a plague, or zombie outbreak. They were like that too. They were kind of like the zombies, but they could talk. They just were committing crimes.
Yeah,
and they were trying to assemble this thing, but they really weren't they really didn't have their own will. They were doing it, the master's coming, that kind of thing,
Yeah, and it happened really quickly.
Yeah.
That's one thing, like I said, in the movie, the pacing is very quick, so some things, if you're really not paying attention, one, you can tell that, it was sort of structured originally as an anthology because, some characters, like the bitchy battle axe aunt at the beginning, she disappears too. They just said, she disappeared, and then they never mention it again.
Like you said, you could tell it was going to be an anthology, and then they just cobbled it together into one story.
Yeah, but it still, makes sense, and it still has a through line, though. But yeah, I actually really like this one, and I think it's, really a shame. I don't think it's quite as good as Witchfinder General or Wicker Man.
No.
But
it's there.
But it's different.
Yeah.
It's kind of doing something different with it. Like I said, the whole notion of constructing the demon's body out of pieces
of you,
like you're growing this little bit of kind of werewolf hair on your leg, or you're growing some claws or some shit like that, and then they're gonna take it and assemble him at the end. And that's a great concept.
And even the kids who are possessed, like one guy, his whole leg is basically the devil's leg, and they hand him a knife, on the ceremony.
And he's like,
he's getting himself worked up to fucking cut it off. He's trying to, like that, get ready to start cutting. It was actually from the knee down, wasn't it?
I think it was the knee down.
Yeah, the knee down.
I mean, you couldn't really tell because he just pulled it up his pants that, but it's just kind of like.
So even though you were possessed, it wasn't easy to do. They were kind of.
Well, he hadn't been. So as I said, I think, and this only just occurred to me really because I'm sitting there going, well, why did the cult kill some of Mark and Kathy and stuff, and then not kill other ones, and the other people seemed willing? I guess it was just a question of who accepted the demon. Yeah. And then the other people just didn't even know about it or didn't accept the demon, but everybody was going to have the pieces growing on them.
Yeah.
And if they didn't willingly give the demon the piece of them,
I guess they took it.
Then the cult was just going to take it.
Yeah, it's probably.
Or they were going to hypnotize, because like I said, the one character at the beginning. What the hell was that character's name? The guy that was gonna marry Rosalind. I can't remember what his name was. But the real tall, lanky guy.
The tall, young guy.
And he actually cut off his own hand, but he didn't do it on purpose, yay demon. He did it because he thought he was.
It tricked him.
He thought he was hurting the demon, but he was actually cutting off his own hand.
Yeah.
But I mean, what a great idea! And honestly, I'm not
redo this movie.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I'm not really into let's remake it, but I think this might be a good one to remake, and especially nowadays, in the last 10, 20 years, when you've seen this huge resurgence.
Yeah.
In folk horror, and people are really interested in it, and I think this might be a good one to remake because it's got a really great concept behind it.
This would go right there with Midsommar, Hereditary.
Hereditary, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be right there.
Well, and one's
I think it was kind of better than Hereditary, if you ask me, in certain ways.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Hereditary was modern. Okay.
Yeah, this one's not. This one's 18th century. And I kind of feel this one is more like The Witch from 2016 or, Robert Eggers' movie or, something like that where, again, it's this kind of going back to this folk horror kind of thing. And you don't really see a lot of movies set during this time period. Like I said, I kind of feel like there's a lot set in the Victorian era, there's a lot set in earlier than this, you know what I mean? 16th century, whereas this one is a little bit later, but it's still kind of an agrarian, a real rural community that maybe is still hanging on to their old ways.
I thought it was 15 or 1600s. By the
no, it's actually.
It's actually.
I think it's 18th century. It's supposed to be.
So 1700s.
And so there's that, because I think that at one point the judge says something about is it James the Third or something like that. I kind of feel like he says something about that. So it's interesting too, because I don't know a lot, a huge amount about British history from this time period, but I think this was kind of a time of sort of religious dissent and a kind of other, so that kind of gives it a little bit of a different spin on it. And especially the character of the judge, who, even though he's supposed to be there with the law and he's in this kind of rural community, but he thinks they're all backward. He doesn't believe in witches. He doesn't, he's from London. He's from the city. He just thinks this is all silly.
Yeah, that shit was from a couple hundred years ago. They don't believe that.
Right. So I think that kind of put an interesting spin on it as well.
Yeah.
Now, really, the only thing that I can knock this movie, and this is probably budgetary, I'm sure, I kind of felt the final confrontation, at the last, thing where they were going to assemble the demon and he was going to manifest. I feel like that was a little truncated. It was a little short. And like I said, they couldn't really show, I like that they didn't really show the demon all that much. Honestly, I kind of wish they'd shown him a little bit less, because when they do show him, like, toward the end, it looks like a dude in a costume a little bit.
It's very Doctor Who 1975.
It is.
Very much. Probably the same company, same guys that made it.
It might have been, yeah. It might have been.
Which, you'd be used to it if you grew up in, watching British stuff from the 70s. You go, oh, okay, yeah, you'd accept it. That's just the way it looked.
Well, I mean, I accepted it too. Yeah. I just kind of feel like
an audience would be like, "Wait a minute, what?"
Yeah.
It's stylized. It's a stylized costume that is obviously a costume. You don't accept it it's symbolic for the damn demon. It's not actually. You're not supposed to buy it. Realism is not what they were going for when they made those kind of costumes for the movies and shit.
Yeah.
I mean, with
the special effects they have nowadays, they could actually make like a really badass looking demon that actually looked like
real.
Pieces of fur of like different people like all patched together. That would actually be pretty cool. Now that I'm thinking about it.
It's just a theatrical costume, very British style. Yeah.
But honestly, it's not even that. I kind of feel like the last part of it is just a little too short.
Yeah.
That's all. It's just kind of like, the final thing is taking place, and then like the judge and the other townsfolk are like just hiding watching it, and then they're like, okay, well, now they stand up and then they stab him, and then he kills Angel and stuff like that. So I just kind of wish they had like maybe made that a little bit longer, maybe made it more of like a fight.
Yeah, the thing is that 70s British stuff of this type, they weren't really into action choreography. They were more into like Shakespearean theater.
That's true.
That's really what they were doing. So I understand. It's like out of Doctor Who. There's no fight scenes in Doctor Who. Everything is theatrical, like Shakespearean shit but they made for TV. And that's what they did.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, that's what it is.
But yeah, I'm just saying, just don't expect like some big fucking final confrontation.
The strength of this movie is that they made a very watchable movie with a bunch of good ideas to trip you out back in the 70s with nothing but good actors, good costumes, and a good script and in real locations. That's what you got. There wasn't no special effects to speak of. No flim-flam, really. It's no money. Just pure writing and talent and acting. That's it.
Yeah, and it's honestly, it's a fun movie. It's a great story. It's kind of a different take, like I said, on the folk horror thing.
It has a good look. It has a good spooky look, and it just like something off the damn Black Sabbath 1 album cover. It's like that. You know what I mean? It's witches and shit.
Yeah, witches and shit.
Witches and shit.
We like
in
that.
England, out in the woods, in old buildings. With fucking 17-year-old hotties in old-fashioned clothes, taking their clothes off. Then you got fucking preachers and fucking scientist-type dudes and judges and shit trying to figure it out. They're
people cutting patches of skin off, throwing witches in the lake.
Dude eventually shows up with a damn sword that's got to be 8 feet long it's got a hilt on this side. It's like one of those swords that they used to, kill horses with. With knights, that's what kind of sword that was.
Yeah.
They used to have a special kind of sword. It was real big like that, and it had big old hilt on either side, and it was something you used to cut the legs off of a damn knight's knight's horse. That's what that was.
That's not
but
nice.
He attacks a damn. Well,
I know.
If you got a knight charging at you, on a horse, you do what you can.
It's like the horse is like, man, I'm just the dude's just on my back. I didn't have anything to do with this. Come on.
So. Yeah. So, but he pulled out that big sword and killed that demon with it in a single stroke. So, not much of a fight scene. But that's not what it was. That's not. The British weren't doing that kind of thing in movies at that time. Not yet.
Yeah, I guess not.
If they did, it was going to be later on or bigger budget. Like the Psychomania. Remember the one about the demon? There was things like action scenes in that, but they were dealing with more money.
That's true. Yeah, this one was very, like I said, Tygon was kind of, their budgets were not approaching, Hammer level or anything like that.
These are drama troops making a movie.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, and and they work in that context, absolutely. So honestly, like if you really like British folk horror, like The Wicker Man and stuff, and you haven't seen this one, then definitely you should see this one. Like I said, it's a little bit of a different take on it. It's on Shudder at the moment. I think it might also be on Tubi, but I'm not entirely sure. As I said, if you do have Shudder, though, I would really recommend, if you have like 3.5 hours to kill, go watch that history of folk horror documentary called Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched. It's really, really good. And it, like I said, it's not just British folk horror, it's all around the world. And it brought up like so many different movies that I hadn't heard of, and it's really exhaustive, and it's really, really interesting. And it talks a little bit about this one, talks a little about the Wicker Man and stuff like that, but it talks about all different folk horror from everywhere, and it's like really, really good. So yeah, that'll do it for this movie retrospective. We will see you guys on the next one. Bye.